Innovations and different design choices on different cars for different teams is what makes Formula One, Formula One. And now we have gotten some pretty great innovations from a lot of different teams going into this 2023 season at this midway point. Which teams have brought the greatest innovations and which teams have brought just some minor ones? I'm going to cover the ones that I think are great in this year. And there is like 5 or 6 different teams. If you stick to the end of the video, I'll go over the one that's probably made the best ones. I mean, it's not really hard to guess. There are some very interesting ones to talk about. First team that I am covering, believe it or not, practically the team that's performing the worst this year, is that Haas car. Now the Haas car isn't great, but it had made an innovation that we first saw in their car. Now here is the thing, this is also used on the Red Bull and the Mercedes, but Haas was, I guess, the first car out of all of them to show their car and to show off this front wing detail, and it is that little winglet on its front wing. And it's an innovation, it's something new. It wasn't in 2022, practically just kind of dictates the airflow in a different fashion, but it goes along with the regulations, and in a strict regulation period on the front wing with not adding too many attachments to it, this was something that Haas figured out could be useful for them. Now, if only they can figure out their front and rear suspension and how they don't burn those tires. Next team is Aston Martin, and this was also seen in the testing period. Now, between Haas and Aston Martin, these were testing period things. They haven't really shown that much innovation since then, except for one thing with Aston Martin, which I will go over next. But first thing is another front wing thing that they did. It was the way that they made this front wing end plate and kind of the way that they've made this whole entire front wing with its really rearmost flap actually not being attached to the original end plate. Now this was innovative, but recently Aston Martin has been kind of under some fire from the FIA, at least the news that we're hearing from Ted Kravitz, as they found some type of loophole. Now this could have been the loophole because their actual rearmost wing wasn't attached, and I think in the regulations it has to be attached in some type of fashion. Maybe it wasn't attached in the correct type of way, maybe they were gaining an advantage from it, but also Red Bull just came out recently and said that the amount of advantage you can really gain out of a front wing and adjusting the rearmost flaps at all on a front wing is minimal, and it's like about a tenth. It's funny they say that because that's all they're finding is tenths and 2/10, even though their car is to the extreme level. Next thing was I wanted to talk about the slide pods. I mean, yes, these were brought in 2022 by Alpine, and they were at that time seen as like, wow, this is actually pretty innovative. But Aston Martin is the one that went for that deep, super water slide effect. Alpine's was always kind of flowy. It wasn't necessarily to this degree. And what this brought was rear grip to the car. Now they have since lost that rear grip, but let's not talk about present. I'm talking about more past when they first came with their original car. They had a lot of rear grip, which really helped the rear tires, taking a page out of Red Bull's book. And the actual slide pods themselves had a lot to do with this rear grip. It dictated the airflow in a specific fashion to feed more into that beam wing, and it gave them that good grip on its rear end, and this really helped out the actual Aston Martin car and made them super strong in the beginning of the year. These slide pods were almost practically used by Mercedes in a way, and now McLaren has picked up on it, and McLaren is now in the fight as well. So it comes to show you they were innovative in the beginning of the year, and a lot of teams are picking up. There were even recent reports, now obviously this didn't end up happening, but the rumors were that Red Bull was going to take that slide pod approach. They did not, but Williams ended up dictating it. So they drew in a lot of teams. They definitely had something going, and a lot of teams looked off and they're like, hey, they're doing a good job. Let's copy them as well. So Aston Martin did think of something innovative in the beginning of the year with its front wing and with the slide pods. Another little design tweak that actually was picked up from the Red Bull squad, but was not originally made by them. Now in 2022, this was originally made, but I wanted to bring it up here in 2023. It was the Williams with this small little divot in its diffuser corner. Now, Red Bull actually adjusted to their diffuser, even though it was found on the 2022 Williams and on the 2023 Williams. So I gotta give Williams their props here. They've actually been a decent car this year, so it's nice to throw in Williams into the mix. I'm about to go into my big, really innovations into this year, the ones that have made the most impact. Wanted to thank you guys. You guys are the best beyond belief. What you guys have done for the support on the channel. Thank you all so much for the support. Please like, subscribe. If you have not, then subscribe. It would really mean the world for me. Let's get into the S-Duct from Ferrari. Now this came in the beginning of the year and everybody was like, is this within the regulations? Is this allowed? Red Bull questioned it in the beginning and people were interested to see, is this type of innovation allowed? Because it could have, and it still, I think, does bring a lot of performance to the Ferrari car, but making a really loophole around it is difficult. Now, what this does is it tries giving them actual front-ended grip, but also bringing that airflow in a way to where it feeds into the side pods and goes even quicker into its real beam wing setup, trying to stall the beam wing. Now, they did do a good job of this, and the way that they've kind of made their new side pods also goes along with the S-duct. That's why the actual side pods themselves are pretty skinny. They don't have that overcut like they used to with their original setup, and now it's a more skinnier setup, but still, they're still trying to have that streamline go to its beam wing and really into its like upper floor to really feed that air. And the S-duct just does that. Like I said, it's meant to give grip, but also shoot the air in a specific direction. Now, what this does do in a counteractive way is it makes the floor a lot less effective, at least feeding into it. A lot of teams have their floor, I mean, if I can kind of show it with a hand, this is Ferrari. They're trying to get it go straight from the suspension into here and go straight out. Something Red Bull has done a great job of. Now you can either do that in the undercut fashion or an overcut like they had in the beginning of the year. Now they kind of have it in a mixed fashion. They still have that real entrance on its floor, still feeding into the back of the car and giving it that straight line performance. They are a very fast car in the straight line, but it does kind of lose them a little bit of downforce points. They did know that coming into the beginning of the year. Charles Leclerc very much mentioned that going into this year. Now for the team you've all been waiting for, the one that has just brought innovation after innovation after innovation. And I'm talking about stuff that for some reason was not found on really the 2022 car as much as it is on this 23 car. And they have came to perfect it, and that is Red Bull. Everything in this Red Bull that makes this car what it is the actual rear of the car. Now, don't get me wrong, the front is beautiful and it is dictated in a very good fashion, but the way the undercut works and feeding into everything is all just in a beautiful unison. Now, looking at this Red Bull car, you see this kind of in part that also gives them that rear downforce, a little bit of drag that Mercedes has kind of adopted to their side pod as of right now. It's a lot less to the extent that Mercedes just used it for, but this is an innovation made by them from the beginning of the season. And not only that, but there is a lot more to this. When you're looking at this picture, it is hard to tell, but if you look between the engine cover and the actual side pod, you can see a little, and I'll point it out with an arrow, spots to where there's an opening actually going into the floor and the suspension. And what that is the way that the actual Honda engine is built into the Red Bull car and having its exhaust almost shoot in the way. Now, if you remember, Sebastian Vettel used to run this in 2013 to 10. Adrian Newey made that beautiful setup with the car to where they can actually feed that straight line speed going through the car in a way to where they were actually able to use the exhaust and the engine in more performance gain. And Red Bull has kind of done the same thing this year. Now, they've done it in a different fashion to what it was before. Before it was feeding almost into the diffuser. Now it's feeding into their beam wing, being able to give it that stall, but also giving it that huge, what we call in the beginning of the year, the triple DRS effect. Now, on some circuits, this will be a lot more useful. On other circuits, it won't. But all in all, this is what makes their car so extreme. It's the rear of the car and how this is really done. And as we talked about last year, because it just shows they have been so brilliant on this car and just discovered so many things that other teams are still struggling to even find. The way that they've made that beam wing from the bottom, it feeds the diffuser into the beam wing, stalling that air, giving them rear grip, but also making the car shoot out like a rocket ship. Now also feeding in with what I talked about with that little hole that they have, giving them even more airflow, that actually comes from their side pod. Now, a lot of teams, and even in 2022, Williams used their side pod they had a hole in the side pod to feed the air to go into the floor and to the beam wing. Now, they didn't do this as effectively as Red Bull, but Red Bull are literally making it go through the side pod, giving also engine cooling, but also being able to provide that type of airflow to where it can shoot out and give them even more DRS effectiveness. It is just a combination that is beautifully done. Beautifully done. Honestly, I got to give it to them. The most innovative team, but also the best team overall in the standards of pit stops, the way they have worked. Red Bull have done it this year, and I feel like This advantage could lock them in until 2025 because the way your engine is built now actually plays a part into the way that the car is being used and so on. So Adrian Newey, a genius, but also a team just working in unison. You gotta commend them. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for the support. Please leave a like, subscribe, it would mean the world, and peace.